G'day, folks. AoS Coach here, and I am back according to the Great Plan. We are talking all things Seraphon, and I am joined by the reincarnation of Lord Muzamundi himself, the Great Slaan. It's a man who needs no introduction, especially for my Seraphon friends who definitely know this man. It's Caleb Hastings, has an incredible YouTube channel all dedicated to the Great Plan. You may know such great videos like Flooding the Board with Saurus Bodies, Ripidactyls, the Big Winner, and Spicy Combos of Seraphon. He has no idea I made up that thing legitimately, but we are going to talk Seraphon, and I want to get a little bit more under the hood around what's good, what's not good, how has 4th edition treated our friends, and how might you make the most of our Dino brothers, whether you are running the old, what do you call them? The old, yeah, you had your wizardy type ones and you had your bestial monstery type ones. I know it's kind of changed a little bit, but I've forgotten the name. I'm like Kowalyk and
Starborn. Starborn was what the other faction was. Yeah.
I'm like, yes, I do remember. But Caleb, g'day, welcome. For the people who don't know, like the 3 people who accidentally clicked the button who don't know who you are, introduce yourself.
Howdy. Yes, I'm Caleb. I am definitely a Seraphon fan. It is by far the coolest faction we have in Age of Sigmar because we get to play with dinosaurs. So, yeah, I do a YouTube channel that focuses all on Seraphon. So if you like the Seraphon faction, come have a look. But I'm definitely excited to be able to sit down and talk with Coach about some Seraphon.
Mate, you definitely, if you're playing Seraphon, you definitely need to be listening to Caleb. You have been committed. Were you 1st edition? I think I really stumbled on you in maybe late 1st, if not 2nd.
I started playing. They already had points when I started playing, so I think that may have been right there at 2nd edition, maybe. So, but yeah, been playing since the Engine of the Gods did some crazy stuff back in the day. So, been playing for a little while.
You've just given me a flashback to 1st edition. I might have told this story when I talked to you last in 2nd edition. I don't think we talked up in 3rd, but I did try. I did send you an email. You never responded to me just for the facts of like, Caleb, where are you? But I'll never forget. I remember being at a tournament where a Seraphon player had 3 turns in a row where they went bottom of like turn 1, generated, I think, was it you rolled 3d6 and then on an 18 you got an extra turn.
Yeah, somehow you just got an extra turn.
Yeah. And then he won the priority roll and got the top of the turn, so you had 3. And I remember at a time where Seraphon, we all could stack command points. I remember a Carnosaur doing like 72 damage because he just like burnt like 6 command points on the bone, like the.
Yeah, those are some crazy times that we had there. Yeah.
So like, let's fast forward a little bit. How are they going? Like, how are you finding Seraphon? Because like, I can tell you the statistics. Like, they are middle of the table right now. Their win rate, depending if you look at like GW or Warhammer or things like that, they're sitting around the 50%, 47 to 51. They're kind of in that kind of middle range bucket. Not crazy strong, not terrible. But how are you finding them in 4th?
Yeah, I think these stats kind of show about where they're sitting. I think they're sitting in a good spot. They feel pretty balanced. Seraphon as a whole, it's a big range. So there's a lot of models in this range, and so you can really kind of look at this army, and there's a lot of different ways you can take it. There's no one dedicated play style that I've found for Seraphon so far. So I think they're pretty good at a lot of things. They don't necessarily have like something they're just better than everybody else at. That used to be like magic at one point. That was summoning. I don't think there's really anything that they're better than everybody else at, but they're pretty good at everything. So I think you see that kind of play out in what you see in the win rate stuff. You'll have people push those 4-1 lists. I haven't seen anybody win like a major GT with them in a while. But I think you can I think you can go to a tournament and reasonably get 3 and 2 with a lot of variety in your list, and so that feels pretty good because you can build some lists with this big range of models that still plays pretty well.
Yeah, it's good like that because we've had times where everyone was building in. Was it late second edition? It was all about monsters, or maybe it might have been the third edition where it was like all about monsters. Just flood the board with stegodons. You've had obviously the wizard build where you've got either Slaan, Croak, double, or one of them. Have your Astrolith Bearer, have your Skinks, have your Saurus Guard and things like that. And that type of castle just keeps getting nerfed, like point increase after point increase. And it's kind of nice. Like when I look at the top performing lists, at least in Seraphon, it feels like it's a good mixture. Like you don't have to go all Coalesce, you don't have to go all Starborn. You can mix and match. You've got your what they call the Agrodons. They're starting to see play. I know when they very first came out, people were like, this doesn't really do a lot. We don't quite like the Agrodons, but they're becoming quite popular, at least from what I'm looking at.
Yeah. I think a lot of the new models that GW has released are very good, and that's kind of nice because you want some of these newer ones. They have some beautiful sculpts in Seraphon. So Croxagore, Agrodon, Raptidons, those are all good units to play, and you can kind of play them in pretty varied ways. So if you're a very aggressive player, there's a Seraphon list for you. If you kind of want to sit back and let people come to you and just play that grind game, there's a Seraphon list for you. If you want high mobility, just moving all around the board, there's a Seraphon list for that. I think the one thing we lack is probably, weirdly, a lot of magic domination. We're decent at magic, but we don't do a lot of damage there. And then shooting is almost non-existent right now in Seraphon. There is some shooting, but it's just not very good. So, but I think there's plenty of options in this army. So
I'm glad you said that because the list, the one unit that I haven't seen a lot of lately or at all is the spawn of Chotek. Like people used to love the old, what was it, Razordons and
Salamanders.
No, Salamanders.
Mm-hmm.
People love the old Salamanders, and this sculpt came out, and it was a beautiful. The spawn of Chotek is such a nice sculpt. And I haven't really seen it kind of come out. In third edition, it was like not really popular. Fourth edition, I'm still not seeing its popularity. So I agree with you. Like the list formation and like the units you're drawing from is pretty varied. Like you can go heavy Croxagore, you can go heavy Agrodon, you can go lots of Carnosaurs, you can go the Saurus Warrior build. There's a couple of them where it's like, I don't really see you very much. And maybe we'll unpack that in this episode.
Yeah. I think with a range this big, you do end up with some units that kind of fall off, and they're waiting for their time to shine. Eventually, they will be good. I do feel like Seraphon is a faction that you can get into, and then you can sit here in Seraphon for a long time because there's a lot of stuff in their model range, and you can play a lot of different lists in this army. So that's fun.
Yeah, like when I look at the War Scrolls, like almost all of them have seen play in some General's Handbook. Like in some General's Handbook, like I probably haven't seen Ripidactyls for a while, but otherwise, like I think I've seen most of these in good lists. Not just like on the board, like actually in 3 and 2, 4 and 1 type army. So
sure,
you're in a good spot.
Sure, yeah.
How are you finding those 4th edition rules and treating Seraphon?
I see that it does seem like 4th edition has been simplified and kind of streamlined as far as the rules go, because there's not a whole lot in Seraphon that you're going to really stack buffs on top of. That kind of used to be the signature of our army, was that you're gonna layer these buffs on top of each other to make a unit really shine. The unit was terrible on its War Scroll, but you could make it really good. I don't see that very much right now. That we can leverage our rules that we have to do some really cool combinations, but it's not like you're really taking, some heroes and some other units and turning, the Agrodons up to 11. Kind of what you see on the War Scroll is kind of what you get. There's a few buffs here and there, but it's not too complicated. So I think some people call, what do they say? It's an honest army. Kind of what you see is what you're going to get. They're going to come fight you. There's not a whole lot of tricks, although there is some fun stuff in here. But so 4th edition, I think it has been streamlined, at least for our army, as you know, in this faction pack. We'll see whenever Seraphon gets a battle tome, what they decide to iterate on and kind of flesh out. So
do you think the new or the changes have been good or bad? Like, has your playstyle changed with the differences in the new commands, right? Whether it's less or more command points. You know, you've got things like magical intervention, counter charge. Obviously, counter charge is great for, you know, maybe more of the dino builds. Magical intervention, clearly, you know, wonderful for our Slaan friends. Objectives getting smaller. Like, has that made it harder for you guys? Because traditionally, you don't flood the board with lots of models. Like, you are quite a small style army.
Yeah, the play style definitely changed from last edition to this one. So before, it was a very magic heavy. It was a castle army. You would build around a Slaan and a Croak, and then you would kind of work your castle out as you're summoning and doing damage and magic. And basically all of that is gone. So it's definitely a different style. Now it's going to be very similar, I think, to anybody who was playing Coalesced in the previous edition. It plays a lot more like that. You're doing melee, you're trying to score the board. There's still, you know, the hints of Starborn with the movement, and there's some movement shenanigans that you can do in Seraphon. So there's hints of that, but it's really more of that melee style army now, which it wasn't the competitive style in the last edition.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the melee style was definitely more of the dino build. The more of the castle league, get your Slaans up, chip away, take out those critical heroes, you know, reduce the power before they got to you. Which is kind of nice that you've got a little bit of a mixture, right? Because again, it's not all in on one area, all in on another area. And as you mentioned, some units are now glowed up, and I think you're seeing a well-balanced faction, probably from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think so. It seems that way.
All right, I'm going to bring up the rules in a second. I've got a couple of questions from Discord that I want to ask you, and then there'll be a few that we'll weave through.
Okay.
You ready for these ones?
Yeah.
All right, so friend of the channel, Ada from Warhammer, had asked, why are the feathers missing from your dinos?
They actually like have them strapped onto the tails of some of the dinosaurs now. So it's like they're trying to get the feathers in there somehow, I guess. But like the Raptidons and the Agrodons, they just strap feathers onto their tail. I think that's the best answer I got for you.
And Flo asking, how can you concentrate on a game when you have the coolest models in the range? And I tell you what, Seraphon, if nothing more, has some of the best models in the game. Like, you look at them, they are beautiful. So, and they take well to contrast. They take well to traditional painting. You can go really high standard. You can go crazy with basing, like, you know, epic basing, for example, a 3D printing place has incredible jungle, you know, resin prints, right? You can go crazy on the bases. Like, you're blessed.
Oh yeah, and you know, if you're looking at getting into Seraphon, it is a fun army to paint, and you can go kind of crazy with the colors, because just about every time I've played another Seraphon army, our table is just full of color, and that always kind of looks cool. It's not just, you know, armor and blood. There's lots of different colors on the table, which ends up looking pretty cool. So it's a very fun army to paint.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool lore. Like, if you want to go, you know, down the path of Chotek, you know, there's a lot of reds. There's a lot of different colors. You can paint, you know, one of the gamers in my community painted these skinks like Skittles. Like, there's, you know, reds and greens and yellows. And like, you can go crazy like they're squigs, but they are a cool range. They are wonderful models. I'm just waiting for the Steggy to get a replace. Like, please, like, it's the biggest disappointment. Like, it's so small. You're like, come on, man, this thing is bigger. Come on.
Yeah. I hope one day.
Had-
I hope one day we get a Dread Saurian in plastic, because that was a big giant dinosaur they had in resin that was almost unplayable. It was so big. So hopefully one of these days they'll bring one back for us. A big giant centerpiece dinosaur. That would be awesome.
Mate, I reckon I played the Dread Saurian like 10 times. So
Oh, yeah?
you say it's
Nice.
unplayable. Yeah. So Dread Saurian, folks, like Google this if you don't have any ideas. So in the transition from Warhammer Fantasy to the old world, or the Age of Sigmar, sorry, there was a series of Forge World used to create a bunch of monsters. It was like a monstrous arcanum that was at the end of fantasy battles. And there was a couple of legacy things that came over. There was a corn dragon, which was incredible. That was a newer sculpt. You had you had merworms, and you had this thing came from June. I've forgotten the name. There was some really cool monsters. Anyway, there's this thing called the Dread Saurian. It was for Seraphon, and its base, I kid you not, was more like a dinner plate. It was insane.
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge.
It was so good. You think Archaon is big? Hold my beer. This Dread Saurian was next level. Insane.
Yeah.
Before I get into the rules, I want to ask you really quickly, have you got any favorite tips or tricks or things that you've kind of learnt for 4th edition that maybe wasn't as strong or was relevant, or things that you did in 3rd edition that maybe we should all learn from?
The focus on battle tactics. I mean, battle tactics, it was important to score those in the previous edition too, but make sure that your list, that you have a plan for scoring some of these battle tactics, because if you don't, you'll run out. And so when you're list building, keep that in mind. There's a couple battle tactics that require board presence, that require movement, some speed. And so build that into your list so that you have a plan for those battle tactics, because it's points, and you need points to win this game. So be thinking about that when you're building lists, not just exactly what does the most damage all the time. You got to have some utility in your list as well.
And maybe that's partially why the Castle Seraphon doesn't quite translate as well, because you still need things to go out there to seize the center, take the flanks, start the charge. So it actually does reward you, at least in this General's Handbook, with priority targets to actually get out there and at least get into the thick of things a little more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm just saying things. You can tell me I'm completely wrong, Caleb. That's literally, you're the subject matter expert here. But by now, we're a couple of months into 4th edition. I have no doubt in my mind that people have looked at their rules. But how do you look at this? And I guess for me, the first one I'm thinking about is the furthering of the Great Plan, because I get to pick that asterism. How do you think about the asterisms and then the furthering of the Great Plan? Because I guess this is really complicated, especially for a newer or an inexperienced person, or the person who hasn't connected the dots yet of how to make the most, because this is your one big rule.
Yeah, and it's good. So the asterisms, just 10-second overview. You pick one of these at deployment, and then you, at the beginning of turn 3, if you achieve something, you get to pick another one. So these are all great buffs. They are. I tend to look at these as there's something I want to do with my list. So as I'm building my list, I'm thinking, which one of these asterisms am I going to play into? That doesn't mean I have to stick with that one, because if we get to deployment and the battle plan doesn't favor one asterism over the other, or the army I'm playing against, I might want something different. You can always pick it there at deployment. So that's nice that you're not locked into one on list building. But have a plan for it. So that, I think that's the number one rule is have a plan for kind of what you're wanting to do. Some of them are just really good, and then some are very situational.
Can I sit on something before you go into the asterisms? I want to sit in that moment you just created, right? So I don't have to do it list building, which is a blessing and a curse. because it means like when I get to the table, I can adapt to my opponent. I can adapt to how many drops they are. I can depend on how I think the flow of the battle's going to be, the battle plan. But that also can create really overwhelming situations where I'm already under, I go to a tournament and I'm under a time crunch. Sometimes tournaments don't have as much time as you'd like traditionally at your local store. And I've got to pick something really quickly. And turn 1 and turn 2 can be really critical turns. So it's almost like, how do I plan? And what are some of the things that you think about? Whether it is like, are there particular ones that you pick more than others? Are there ones where, I see this particular faction, or, this opponent has a lot of shooting, I'm going to do this. Like, how do you give me some advice here, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
Okay. I think it does kind of come down to what your play style is. So I think there is one that's probably safe pick 100% of the time. So Sotek the Deliverer, where you're adding 2 to the move characteristics of everybody in your army, all the Seraphon units in your army, you're just adding 2 to the move. Fantastic. Movement is key to this game. That's how you get places, how you get to the opponent, you get to the objective, you get to the battle tactic you're needing to do. So movement is always good. So when in doubt, pick that one, because you're never going to regret having an extra 2-inch movement on all these things. But where your strategy comes in, if you're looking to alpha strike, you definitely want to go Sotek the Deliverer. If you're looking at the long game, I'm looking to finish this game in turn 3 and 4, then maybe you take one of the other ones where you're going to be looking to further the great plan and grab another asterism. So there are some, like Quetzal the Preserver, which subtracts 1 from the rend of melee weapons that are targeting you while you're wholly within friendly territory. This one is incredibly strong. It's essentially +1 to your save is what it is. But you can't go aggro and make this one work. So as you're looking at your list, am I going to let the other person take the first turn? If I'm going to make them go first and they're probably going to attack me, then this is a great one to flex into their deployment. So if you want to make it easy, pick Sotek. If you're going first and you want to get across the board, pick Sotek. If you're making them go first and they're going to alpha strike you, pick Quetzal. The other ones are good. I think they have a little bit less use unless you're specifically building into them. Itzel the Tamer allows critical hits for your companion weapons, which companion weapons is a weird keyword. It's one of the worst keywords to have on an attack. But in Seraphon, we do get a little bit of extra buff here. This one right here is designed for your Agrodons or your Raptidons. It works really well with them. So if you're going heavy on those, take it, but I almost never take this turn 1. So this would be something you might flex into for further the great plan if you achieve your little side quest that we've got. So
what I'm hearing, just to pause this, right? So
sure.
I pick my asterism, and obviously, we can't tell you the silver bullet, folks. So we're giving you ideas. +2 movement could be really good for, like, your either your Agrodons or your cavalry type units or your monsters, or it could actually be really good for like your Croxigor and Saurus to get them up the board a little more. If you feel like you really need magic, you've obviously got your Mysticity piece to improve the casting roll, and obviously the Quetzal piece as well. If you think you're going to get into combat early. If you don't think you're going to get into combat till early, you might hold that. And then to your point, you've then got further the great plan where at the start of turn 3, you pick a quest or you've done your quest, and you can get an extra one, right? So the effect is pick a different asterism. So, you might not need +2 movement late game, but sure as hell in the thick of things need Quetzal or you whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you think about this?
Absolutely. And you could, if this is data overload when you're looking at the screen, you can almost forget about further the great plan. In my experience against like a competitive player, I almost never get further the great plan because I'm telling them, look here, I'm taking Sotek, and if your enemy general is in combat or destroyed at the beginning of 3rd, I'll get another buff. So what are they going to do? They're going to prevent that. If I've taken Quetzal, all they have to do is get an enemy into my territory, wholly my territory by the start of turn 3, and they prevent this. So I find a lot of times this side quest is prevented. Maybe that's on me, but a lot of times this won't even come into play. So if there's one that you really want for your army, pick it first. Don't try to be getting it in turn 3. Just go ahead and take the one that you really want. One that's almost guaranteed. I mean, it's very easy to get the side quest for is Topek, which is the +1 to casting for your Seraphon units. So you take this, you get extra casting bonus for your Slaan, and if your Slaan is not in combat and hasn't been destroyed, you'll get this. At this point, at the start of 3, if the Slaan is already dead, you're probably lost the game anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I find that one's probably the easiest one to get a second asterism in. But in general, pick the one you want there in turn 1.
I was thinking the Itzel one, Itzel the Tamer, would be the one that would be most likely in turn 3. Maybe.
True.
True. I'm guessing. Like, I have no idea. Like, I'm guessing. And when I look at those, and I'm like, right, okay, I need to pick one at the start of the battle. Okay, I feel like by turn 3, if I'm in the thick of things, assuming I'm not like the Slaan Castle and, just trying to project, I'm most likely it's Itzel that I'd probably get in turn 3.
Absolutely. Yeah, that it is that one you can get fairly easily. And you're going to have things with companions, Agrodons and Raptidons. You're going to have one of those in your list probably. And so you're going to get that buff from them for their companion attacks. So on Agrodons, it's very good because you have other ways to buff up the number of companion attacks on them. So that becomes very good there. And you're going to be fighting stuff with the Agrodons anyway. So the some of the good things though here, looking at these asterisms, some of them do stack in interesting ways with other buffs in our army. So looking quickly at Quetzal, the -1 rend, we have a spell which we'll get to that also goes to -1 rend. We have some pluses to save on certain units, so you can all of a sudden kind of build a very tanky army. And if you're doing that, maybe you build into that. Same with Sotek. We have things that will add even more movement to units. So with this and Beastmaster, you get even more movement. You could have some of this skink cavalry going like 18 inches on their base war scroll. So it's you can get some extremely fast things going. So some of those will stack well. Yeah.
And I love the guarantee, right? Because I could look at the battle plan and say, right, I don't want to put anything in the center of the board. So turn 1, I want to take the flanks as an example. But often when you take the flanks, sometimes it can be really hard to then get into the thick of things. To your point, you add +2 to movement with Sotek. You then get extra movement buffs. That's a low risk play. You can get them into the side and then zoom them straight into the middle of the board whenever you need them. Or alternatively, you've got some support pieces who can quickly follow up. Like, I love that. To me, Sotek is one of my favorites, unless I really need the Topek buff.
Yeah.
But Quetzal's also really good, actually. I think I could see all 3 of them depending on the style.
Quetzal is probably the one that is the most dependent on the battle plan. There's a lot of battle plans that have friendly territory all the way to the middle, but if you're playing on one that doesn't, it's just a little too restrictive, and you'll go to something else. But if you're playing in one that has friendly territory all the way to the middle of the board, you can get a lot of usage out of that. So, anytime you have flexibility here in what you choose as your buff is fantastic, especially when it comes at deployment. So I think this does offer an extra layer of strategy for your lists, that you can look at who you're playing, you can look at what battle plan you're playing, you can look at your army, and you can decide what is the most benefit for you there at the table.
Yeah, I guess what I'm thinking about is like to simplify this. How do I start? Like my decision tree starts with potentially Sotek or Quetzal. If I really need the magic, I'll go Topek. If I really have built into companion, I'll go here. But these are my 2 starting points. And then depending on the battle plan that has lots of neutral territory, then Quetzal gets thrown out the window because maybe that's a turn 3 thing. I'm fighting over these spots.
Absolutely.
I'm sure this is all, as you said, it's going to stack, and there's going to be a whole bunch more that we get into the strategy. And Caleb, yes, has provided me a bunch of lists so we can bring it to life. But then when we get to the battle formations, it feels like to me that some stand out more than others. Like they all four of these don't feel equal. How do you look at battle formations, and what are your favorites?
I'm glad that a lot of these aren't locked to a very specific unit. They're a little bit more open. Now, some of them do have keywords of skink and source, but there's enough units and you can mix and match that they're going to get use. So, it's very hard to get away from Shadow Strike. That's the second one listed there is very good. So if you're looking at just probably the most competitive option, that's probably where you would fall, because it offers out of phase movement essentially. So in your shooting phase, that you get to pick 3 different skink infantry or cavalry units that are not in combat, and then each target can move d6 inches. So very good, but on its own would be very good. But we also have some units that can really take advantage of this. So we have what used to be called chameleon skinks. They're called hunters of Huanche now, and they can ambush in. They can deep strike off the board, and they have to do that outside of 9. This essentially allows us to negate a redeploy. So the big, kryptonite of an ambushing unit is redeploy right now, where you get to move D6 away from that unit, essentially. This allows us to move closer to them if we need to. So that allows us to use those Hunters of Huanche's ability, which can reduce their charges. But also it helps keep your skink cavalry closer. It makes them faster. This doesn't mean that they can't charge after this. So let's say you've got Ripperdactyls, just using one of our very fast units. It's 14 on its war scroll. You're adding 2 from the Asterism. Let's say you're adding 2 from Beastmaster. Let's say you had run and charge spell on them. So now they're going 18 plus 6. They're going 24. And then you get another D6 move, and then they could still charge. So all of a sudden, this right here just opens up. Just speed like crazy. And so there's been many times where this has come in critical for Hunters of Huanche, of course, but also Raptidons, which are one of your light cavalry hammers. So cavalry right now is very good. It's usually they're wound dense. Usually they can do a lot of damage. Usually reinforced, they're very good. And Raptidons are pretty cheap. They're fragile, but they're cheap, and they can do some good damage. So they're fast already. This gives them a little extra movement, especially to kind of battle against redeploy. So just an incredible ability there, Shadow Strike. That one is probably my favorite one. It's very hard to go away from it once you get.
I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell about that passionate explanation of the Shadow Strike. And it is quite popular. When you look at tournament lists, Shadow Strike and Sunclaw are the 2 ones that pop up again and again and again.
Yeah. Sunclaw is if you're not looking too heavy in the skink stuff, the Source and Croxagore, which are very good units on their own. This does open up any Saurus. So you're talking even like your Carnosaurs and your Agrodons, Warriors, Guard, all that kind of stuff. You get extra pile-in moves at the end of both of mine and your turn. You get an extra pile-in move, and then you do D3 mortar wounds potentially onto the opponent. Any kind of extra movement is good. This is really nice to be able to, grab those objectives that maybe you were just barely outside of, or pull in with Agrodons, pull in something of theirs so that you make sure you keep your fights rolling so that you keep their buff up. So Sunclaw is great. It's just, that out of turn rules, like out of phase rules that you can use are always really good in an army. So both of those are good. If you've got skinks, Shadow Strike, if you've got Saurus, Sunclaw, but really a list is probably going to have a little bit of both skink and Saurus, and so you can kind of flex into either one of these if you want to. So those are definitely the 2 highlights. Eternal Starhost has gotten some play recently. I've noticed it pop up in some lists. It is a teleport. any unit, you can basically teleport on a 3-up. And so that's nice in an army that maybe if you're looking for a little bit more movement in this army, or moving a big block of something like Source Warriors that you need to precisely get on an objective to get their buff, that can be good. Just you hate to have your entire battle formation summed up in one dice roll that needs to go off on a 3-up. So not as much fun there. And the Thunderquake, add 2 to the health. It's just not enough for Source out, or for the monster stuff. The monsters need help. Monsters really aren't doing that well in 4th edition, it seems. And so, which is sad, because Seraphon has a lot of really good monsters. Not really good right now, but really nice monsters that are fun to play and stuff. But they just aren't quite up to snuff right now with the rest of the army. So I would have liked to see that Thunderquake buff be a little bit different.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Thunderquake or it's just because monsters in general, like it's not just Seraphon monsters. Like you see a lot of armies outside of Seraphon avoiding monsters. They're not using, and often it's a monster hero where you have so many really good monsters that don't even need the hero. And I guess this comes to a few things, right? You know, people trying to get as low drops as possible. You know, 2 to 3 is kind of the average. But, you know, if you want to be tapping into your Carnosaurs and Steggies, like they're not that strong right now. Like, you know, people aren't building into Bastiladons. Like, it's a hard one. I love monsters. It's what draws me to Seraphon, them and the Croxigors. I think Croxigors, it feels like it's a really good time to be a Croxigor player right now. For those people who saw the new sculpts, weren't really sold on them in 3rd edition, I feel like this is their time to shine. They're doing quite well. Warspawned maybe a little bit better than the regular Croxigor. Maybe I'm misspeaking there. I feel like the Warspawn is a little better, a little more popular, but it's a good time. Croxigor, I think, is a good spot.
Yeah. Croxigor are very good right now. So I think they're high damage and a lot of wounds. They're fairly slow, but you can negate that with some of the different buffs that we have. And you can, with the Warspawn, I think you hit on it. Warspawn to probably edge out the normal Croxigor just a little bit, just because I can generally guarantee getting the extra damage on their weapons by just charging in some skink unit along with them. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I just don't like the 3-up. Like if you, I just, yeah, no, thank you. Because like if I fail it, like there's literally my battle formation benefit has just gone.
Yeah,
like, it's like, oh, that sucks. That sucks. But look, you know, I think you've got some good options here, and you've started alluding already to some of the synergy. You referred to Beastmaster. When you look at the 3 hero traits, how do you find them, and do some stand up better than others, or any combinations starting to form here?
Yeah, I think Beastmaster is the one that stands out. So Beastmaster adds, I think I've mentioned it a few times, but it adds 2 to the move characteristics of friendly Seraphon cavalry and monsters for the rest of that phase if they're wholly within 12 of this unit at the start of the move. So very good buff for all your cavalry, which is very good right now. So your Agrodons and your Raptidons. So all of a sudden you can kind of see how this works together with the asterism. And I'm getting +4 to my move of my cavalry. So all of a sudden it's a very fast army. The Agrodons in this edition got an extra +2 to move anyway. So they're at 10. And now you're going to be moving up 14. That's enough to clear across a deployment zone very easily in most of the battle plans. So Beastmaster is very good. You do have to make sure you deploy well to keep them within 12, keep the cavalry wholly within 12 of this hero, but generally that's not too difficult to do. So Beastmaster is the standout for me. There are some fun things to do with, I think, Being of the Stars, where you essentially make this hero ethereal, ignore modifiers to save rolls, positive and negative. So I like playing this on a Carnosaur as a flanker unit. Something to go along the board edges, take out the smaller stuff. To be honest, the Carnosaurs aren't that expensive for what they do. They have decent damage, and it's not great damage, but it's decent damage. And if you can make one ethereal, then now it's very difficult for the things out on the flanks to kill this monster. So there's some fun stuff to do there. You can layer it with like a Troglodyte who's going to always be healing. Generally, probably not too useful on like your smaller heroes, but good if you're kind of if you want that big monster centerpiece in your army that is going to be difficult to kill.
Yeah, I was having a quick look to see the save of a Slaan Star Master, and as a 5-up, I'm like, oh, you got a 6-up ward, but I'm like, on a 5-up, yeah, nah. I'd probably, to your point, either it's the Carnosaur, either of the Carnosaur heroes. They seemed like or even, I don't know, you'd put it on a Troglodon hero, but they seem like better value if you're going to do Being of the Stars. But you're right, Beastmaster stands out really well. Reptilian Cunning is all right, and I think if you're building into that heavy melee, again, Agrodons and things like that, possibly.
Yeah, it's anytime you can save a command point in this edition is quite valuable, but I think just in comparison to Beastmaster, I would rather get my stuff there than save a command point if I get there. And so I do like Beastmaster over this one, but it's not a bad pick because it will save you a command point, which is extremely valuable in this edition.
I think you just got to think about this as I get to use it once. If I get to use it any more than once, that's a bonus. Because like you've got to charge, right? So unless you are charging, killing things, keep charging, and not being ground down or being countercharged, like you don't receive the benefit. While you're Beastmaster, you are always going to be, getting this benefit. So to me, Beastmaster Being of the Stars, and then third is Reptilian Cunning. There's too many dependencies, I think, and your Carnosaurs are not as killy as you probably want them to be to reap the rewards of this. Like if you could go in, charge, kill, move on, yeah. But I don't think they're as killy as you need them to be to have that as a consistent piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think yeah. All right. We don't have to agree. I'm trying to find a good use for that. I'm like, I don't like having to charge. Like I don't want to always charge just to get the buff.
I think one unit I have seen it pop up occasionally on is like the Agrodon hero. So your Agrodon hero kind of wants to stick near your Agrodons if you're taking that combination to give them the once per game buff that he can give them. So in those cases, you're probably charging him in along with the Agrodons, and it might be useful there to save you command point. If for some reason you didn't want the extra movement on them, then that would be a use for it.
I feel like the plus movement is probably better, especially as Agrodons aren't that fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about your artifacts? This feels like there's a much better, more balanced choice.
Yes, I think you'll see two of these in a lot of lists. Kotal Familiar it's only once per battle, which, I tend to stay away from once per battle things, but I think this one's good enough that it's worth it if you're looking at certain things. So you declare a spell ability for a Seraphon Wizard within this unit's combat range. You're probably going to put this on a wizard just so you don't have to worry about staying right next to him. The effect is you add D6 to the casting roll for that spell. So this is very good for the magical intervention. When you're trying to cast a spell in the opponent's phase and you want to make sure that it's going off. So it's going to be at -1, but then you can add another D6 roll to that. So I'll use this a lot if maybe I'm not going heavy spell casting, which sounds weird, but I have one specific spell I want to get off. Let's say I'm taking a Starseer and I want to make sure and get a Kronspine out. Yeah, this is a great artifact to throw at that Kronspine cast in the opponent's turn. So just a very juicy combo there to make sure you get one of those out. So
yeah, I don't hate it. I'm so risk adverse at times where I'm like, when I see D6, I see 1. I see 1. I'm like, because I'll roll the 1. Like most people go, yeah, I'll roll a 5 or a 6. I'm like, yeah, I'll roll a 1. But to your point, especially like with something like a Kronspine, you just want to get that one thing out, or the Purple Sun. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Awesome. Yeah,
absolutely.
good call.
The other one I think you'll see used a lot is the Incandescent Retresses, which is any hero phase. So that's my hero phase and your hero phase. I get to heal D3 to this unit. That's great because that will keep some of these heroes alive. So the small ones, that's a big percentage of their health that's going to heal. But also for, let's say you're taking, a bigger monster that's going to be doing something fun, going into combat. This helps keep them alive and ticking a little bit longer. There is a really fun combination with the Troglodon. The Troglodon already heals at the end of the turn. So now you get to heal at the beginning of the turn too, if you put this on the Troglodon. Combo that up with making it the Troglodon ethereal. And now you have a unit that is extremely hard to kill and will heal, 2d3 per turn. And unfortunately, the Troglodon just doesn't do any damage in combat. So it's not probably the best use of resources. But putting this on like a flanker Carnosaur, or you've got this distraction piece that's going to go kill the stuff on the sides, or try to gum up the middle of the board. This is a great piece to put on that. It's good on your Slaan. If anybody's doing chip damage to it, this will help heal it back up some. Good on the little guys too if you need it. But it's a good artifact.
I think it's a great combination when you think about like the Troglodon could be on the flanks, getting into the backfield, being annoying, being a distraction where people are like, I've got to get rid of this thing before it gets into my castle or gets into my little juicy center. Or they ignore it. You're like, right, okay, well, I'm going to go start pinning things, being annoying, taking the terrain features, or getting into their faction terrain if they happen to have one. It's not a bad little call you've just made. I know it sounds like a bit of a lull, but actually that's really annoying. And if they ignore it, you win. If they go and attack it, it's not going into your Slaan. It's not going into your other important things.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Blood, the blood pendant, or the blood. The bloody copy paste from the document can be annoying. Like you'll notice there's a few words. The blood pendant, we'll call it blood pendant now.
Yeah.
Thank you. RAFI. There's a couple of kit words that always mess up on the copy paste. It's not bad. Like it's actually not bad, but I feel like you've got to have a really specific build. But then the question is, are you better off with the D3 heal? And I kind of feel like the D3 heal is where I land.
Yeah, I'm just not sure what hero they intend us to put this on. So we don't really have a hero that the hero's weapon does a bunch of damage where adding one attack would be significant. The old blood on Carnosaur has a 3 damage attack if he charges, but it's still only -1 Ren. So it's not really that impactful to add +1 to the attacks for that. Maybe +2 if it's damaged. So I'm not really sure what their intent on this one is and who it's supposed to go on to. So, yeah, I like the other ones better.
Goes back to my comment about the Carnosaur. Like, it does damage, but not enough damage for you to be like just powering through, keeping on. It feels the same type of vein. If you get that killy monster hero, blood pendant thing I talked about in the past, great. Now, it doesn't do enough damage, but who knows what's coming down the line. Maybe General's Handbook is all about monster heroes in 2025. Who knows?
That would be sweet.
Oh, well, I'm looking at my Seraphon limited edition box. I'm like, if that comes out, I'm 3D printing some Stegodons because I hate the current model. I get myself an Engine of the Gods and it'll be Lord Muzamundi converted, and I will go all in on Carnosaurs, Bastillodons, and everything else.
Yes.
You got 2 spell laws. Unlike most of the factions, you, Zinch, maybe someone else, most people don't have a spell law choice. So you have 2. How are you seeing this one? Like Celestial Manipulation versus your Primal Jungles. I guess they kind of, the name alludes to where you would use which one, but let's start with Celestial Manipulation. Are there spells that you use more often? Do you pick this one over Primal Jungles? Talk to me.
I think you'll see this one, Celestial Manipulation, picked the vast majority of the time. It is the better spell lore, just because it has a little bit of damage, a little bit of utility, and a little bit of speed. So it has kind of the range of things that you would want to use throughout the game. Mystical Unforging, subtracts 1 from Rend. It's very short range. There's ways to get around that, but a very good utility piece that will stack with other stuff. Comet's Call is they used the same name of what was our signature spell last edition, or maybe since the first edition. I can't remember, but that was Comet's Call was what everyone hated about Seraphon, because we'd be bringing comets down on heroes all over the board. Now it's your standard horde killer spell. You roll. I think a lot of factions have this type of spell. You just roll a dice for every model in the unit, and on a 5-up, it does a mortal wound. So it allows you to do some damage. That's one of our only damaging spells that we have. We don't really have a lot of spells that do damage in Seraphon. So this one actually has use and will do damage versus hordes. I cast this one a lot, so it's a good spell, but not wholly unique to Seraphon or anything. So. Speed of Huanche is very good. This is you're gonna be casting this all the time. Casting value is 6. You pick a Seraphon unit, wholly within 12, kind of standard stuff, and you get run and still shoot or charge. You don't care about shooting. Nothing in our army is worth shooting, but the run and charge is very good because that just combos with all the other speed that we have to make this army quite quick if you do that. And you don't necessarily have to put on something that's already going to be extremely fast, but something like Kroxagor, this is very good on. Save that command point so you can max that run. You have +2 from the Asterism, and now those Kroxagor are all of a sudden going 13 inches and still making a charge. So it turns the Kroxagor into something very fast, or relatively fast for what they are. I mean, they're big, giant, lizard things. So going that far is very good for them. So you have a lot of use in this spell lore that you'll find is very good throughout your game.
And they're all quite generous, like 2 6s and a 7. That's quite generous when you think about it. So you don't even potentially need that artifact for the plus unless, again, you're going for the Kronspine, something with a really heavy cast that you really need. They're all good spells.
Yeah.
They're all really good spells, and they're all very achievable.
Mm-hmm.
How many wizards do you normally have in a list? Or would you recommend that we should have? Because this is a good spell lore.
Yeah. You probably... it's either going to be 1 or 2. You can't leave home without a wizard in this edition. So, you've got to at least bring 1. Just you're otherwise you'd be missing out on the free manifestations. I don't think you have to have 2 because you can get the vital spell off that you need, whether that's going to be the Speed of Huanche or Comet's Call, whatever you're needing in that turn, or a manifestation. But the Slans give you 3 casts, so you have plenty of opportunity to cast, your manifestations as well as pick one of these from the spell lore. So I don't think you're forced into bringing 2 wizards. 1 is enough. So.
And by the way, I just want to pick you up on something. You mentioned the old Comet's Call is why we didn't like you, Seraphon players. That was just the last edition. My I wouldn't say hatred, but I have been scarred from first edition when you had the Croaknado.
The good old Balewind Vortex. Yes.
Yeah, check that out, kids who have joined us in third edition. There was the Balewind Vortex, is the OG endless spell. Croak would get on the middle of the board, teleport, because the Balewind would turn Croak into one model, and then would literally just pulse mortal wounds. And
it was beautiful.
There were so many iterations of Croak that we hate. We're just so scarred by Croak.
Yeah.
Oh, bloody Croak. Oh, Seraphon. The other side, which you're right, when I look at the lists, when I look at Jungle versus Celestial, it's Celestial every single time. So what makes Primal, I guess, a less optimal spell choice? Is it the fact that the Earth Tremble casts on an 8? Is it the fact that, it's just not as useful as the other spell lore? Tell me about how you see this one.
Yeah, this spell lore, it's so close to being good, but it's just a little off. So, like Light of Chotek wants to be this healing spell, but you have to be you're rolling versus how much damage you've taken. If it was just like a flat number of dice, then all of a sudden I would like the spell a lot better. The Earth Trembles is just a weird spell. It's one of the draw a line, you're going to do some mortal wounds, that kind of thing. They haven't quite figured this spell out. They've had a couple. This is maybe the second time they've tried the Earth Trembles, and it still hadn't worked yet.
The old Cities of Sigmar had basically the same spell on the Amber Griffin. So the old battle mage on Griffin, draw a line of sight, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
it never took off.
yeah. It wants to be on like a combat wizard, and generally our wizards don't want to be that. They want to be behind screens, which you'd be doing damage on. So just kind of a weird one. And then Empowered Celestite on the surface looks amazing, but it is only for the rest of that turn. So like if this, it's so close. If this was until the start of your next hero phase, which is what a lot of spells are, all of a sudden you could turn like a unit of Source Warriors into just like this, this porcupine that nobody wants to charge because they're at Ren 2. And you're wanting to put it on, I guess, like it goes fine on Warriors, but generally you don't want to charge Warriors. You're looking to hold objectives with them. It goes on Agrodons, but then you're missing out on the extra speed you got from Speed of Huanchi. So it comes down to that give and take again of would you rather have a little bit better quality attacks or actually get there and make the attacks. So it just loses out to the extra speed from the other ones. So they're close. They just need a couple tweaks, and I think that this spell lore could be good.
I just don't think it's as useful. I think when I look at the last spell lore, there's situations where I could see all three of these being used and viable choices depending on how the game is going. When I look at this one, the Primal Jungles, it's much more situational. It's way more situational. It's like, oh, do I really want to be doing this? And look, Light of Chotek, if I've got, again, that Carnosaur or that Troglodon who has been just taking damage, it's ethereal, it's been soaking up, and it's degraded pretty heavily, getting it back to full health as much as possible would be great. Double down with the D3 heal, double down with a rally, really powerful. But in the early game, when you haven't taken as much damage, like, it's not that useful. So you've got to have really specific use cases. I think if I'm taking this lore, it's probably for that empowered Celestite, and then the Light of Chotek later in the game.
Yeah.
That to me is why I'm
empowered
taking it.
Empowered Celestite is still a good spell. Anytime you can add +1 rend. There is, I think, a use for, like, if you wanted to argue this spell lore, if you really wanted to take it, Empowered Celestite actually makes a good magical intervention. If somebody's going to be charging your unit, this is a good spell for that, because now all of a sudden they're going to be +1 rend. So probably looking at either Source Guard or Source Warriors is what you'd be looking to use this on if somebody's charging you. That would probably be the best case scenario for that, I think. So
I was thinking the same thing, like, because you talked about, in your magic phase, but yes, when you're in doing a magical intervention, yeah, that's a great little combination. But again, it goes back to being situational. It comes down to, you've really got to plan this out. So if you're going to do it, if you're going to plan this out, you already know what you're going to do. But I think Celestial is time.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else to talk about so far when it comes to spells? I think we've kind of covered. Actually, you know what? What are your favorite manifestation laws? Normally at this point, I'd actually go to manifestation law, but funnily enough, Seraphon doesn't have one, which feels weird. I wonder if they'll add one with your battle tome.
I hope so. I think there's some cool stuff that you could, some very cool models that you could have as manifestations with all the magic that the Slaans have available to them and things, and the these jungle themes and monsters. You could have some really cool stuff. So hopefully we'll get some endless spells or manifestations sometime.
They're still endless spells. They're endless spells. If you're a wizard, they're endless spell.
Okay.
If you're invocation, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But you're like when I think about this, Caleb, last edition you used to summon things, right? You would manifest them from the celestial realm to the real life. You don't summon anymore. So I wonder if the manifestations is a way to bring that theme, because that felt thematic. That felt thematic. And I kind of miss it a little bit. I wonder if manifestation, and all right, what would you want? If you got to choose, and if Games Workshop's listening to this and they're like, right, head designers, we're going to build this out for Caleb. What does Seraphon's manifestation law look like?
Some type of like spawn pool, something that would pop up and give some buff for like regeneration, maybe something like that, some healing, that kind of type of thing. That would be fun. Maybe this is the opportunity to bring back a spiritual throwback to the Dread Saurian and just have this giant maw that comes out, or the incarnate. Seraphon would be perfect place to have a giant incarnate monster thing show up. So that would be pretty cool.
I'm having flashes, right? Daughters of Cain has the blood snake. I feel like Seraphon would have something like that. I think of shackles. I'm like, right, surely there's like some vines or something that like ties people down and like enwraps them, or
so that we used to have these models called jungle swarms, and it was basically just a bunch of snakes. And so and you see a little bit of that in the newest Underworld's Warband. I think they have a couple little jungle swarm things there, so something like that would be cool. But yeah, what you said about the vines and stuff, some type of thing that's becoming coalesced. So that was kind of always, the Seraphon, if they had spent too long here, they became coalesced. They became wrapped up in the jungle of the area. So that could be cool.
Yeah, I like it. Let's make it happen, Games Workshop. And I'm sure everyone in the chat's going to be writing their ideas. I'm all down. Yes. It feels like a crime that Seraphon doesn't have their own manifestation. Like, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel right.
I agree. Oh, right, but you had asked about the favorite manifestation lore.
Yeah.
It's probably hard to move away from Morbid Conjuration. There's a lot of spells available there. They're all good. And you have a caster in a Slaan who is really only as good as your manifestations that you're taking. So Morbid is very good, but I don't think you have to only pick that. There are other good ones out there. I like the Primal energy manifestations. That one's just fun to me. I like the burning head, or not the burning head, the gnashing jaws. Burning head's fine, but gnashing jaws is a very good damage dealer there, and it's a lot of fun to play. It gives you a little bit of something, some damage there in the charge, and so I like that one.
Lifestorm plays nicely as well, probably to troops.
Yep. Life Swarm. I've backed up a unit of Croxagore with Life Swarm, and that because generally they have so many wounds, they end up with a couple extra damage on them, and then Life Swarm will keep them topped off. Twilight Sorceries is kind of interesting to where you get the portal, because you do have some spells that are very short range. The 12-inch -1 to Rend is very good to send through the portal, or the Starseer has a spell that can shut off a ward, and so that is very good to send through that portal if you need to. So, and it's a 2-cast wizard, so you can get that through. So that one's interesting. Also, I think if you're not taking a Slaan, then you can always, if you're flexing into something like a Starseer, which only has 2 casts, or a Star Priest, which only has 1. You can still reliably get out Incarnate the Kronspine with the Kotal Familiar with that extra dice roll. So even though you'd only have 1 cast, you can make it a quality cast from that wizard. So,
and you could always potentially go for depending on how you build your list, go for that 3-up teleport if you choose that subfaction battle formation, or get yourself onto a place of power should most battle plans have one. And then you go for that incarnate. with or without artifacts. So, and you know, if you're not going heavy magic, that'll probably play nicely.
Sure. Yep.
Which then kind of leads me to not necessarily Croak, although I'm sure we have to talk about Croak. What are some of your favorite war scrolls right now? We've talked a lot. We've talked about Agrodons. We've talked about the Hunters. We've talked about, I know you've mentioned on your video, you know, you've got a whole bunch of videos around things like, you know, Saurus Warriors and being great anvils, whether it's Ripidactyls. I'd love to call out maybe some of your favorite units, and then I'll bring up some of your lists. And might be worth talking about Croak. We've talked about all of the bad memories or good memories, depending on where you're at. Where does Croak stand? Because we haven't talked a lot about Croak yet. A lot of our conversation has been around Slaan or things that are not Croak.
Yeah, Croak is just an absolute awesome model. Lord Croak looks amazing. The Slaans look amazing. These are the things you want on the table as Seraphon because they just look awesome. So a lot of fun to paint, a lot of fun to build, a lot of fun to play. But Lord Croak is one of these models that they have a difficult time writing his war scroll, it seems. It's either like so good it's broken, or it's so bad it's almost not playable. And I think we're more towards that bottom end with Croak right now. He's not unplayable, but it's a difficult unit to justify at its cost versus the Slaan. So Croak wants to do a bunch of damage in the magic phase, but to do that, it has to get extremely close. And then even when it does that, you're going to fail a lot of this damage output. So because it's reliant on spellcasting, but not just that, there's another gate after that. You got to roll dice after that to see if he's going to do any damage. And so it just turns out it's not enough damage for what Croak costs.
So it's interesting you say that, because I was just quickly having a look at the app to see the points difference. And normally when you've got like unique versus non-unique version of something, there's like a 50 to 70 point discrepancy between the two. This is a 150 point difference. Like right now, Croak is 430, Slaan is 280.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what do you get for that? Like, you get a tough guy. I mean, the Lord Croak's got a 4-up save and a 4-up ward. That's tough. That's tough for a hero. Unfortunately, all of that is negated by Dead for Innumerable Ages, which is one of his abilities. I'm going to put abilities in quotes here because this ability can you can end up just killing this model on a bad roll. So what you do at the end of any turn, so that's my turn, your turn, if any damage has been allocated to Lord Croak, you roll some dice, and if you roll high or he's taking a lot of damage, then Croak is just dead, just straight up dead. And so you remove that ability, take that ability away, and I think all of a sudden Croak is a lot more playable. Probably still not the better option than the Slaan, but a lot more playable. But for, over 400 points, you're talking about a unit that's not doing a ton of damage and can accidentally die very easily. So it becomes just, I think, a little too risky to do that. Lord Croak is a great caster, +2 to cast, has the same ability as a Slaan to unbind anywhere on the board, which is nice. Doesn't have any pluses to unbind, unfortunately, but can stop some enemy casts. But just a little too random on when it could accidentally die. The other thing is, between Croak and Slaan has an ability to just bring back a unit at half strength, which Croak just doesn't even have. And so now you're telling me the Slaan, which is cheaper, okay, not quite as good of a caster, but pretty good, does what you need it to do as far as getting manifestations out. But then
good enough.
Instantly makes up its points as soon as it brings a unit back. You're bringing back a unit like half strength unit of Agrodons or Kroxigor. All of a sudden, the Slaan's basically costing you nothing. And so, without that similar ability on Croak, I think the comparison just isn't there. So, Croak needs some help or a vast point decrease.
Yeah, I just re-looking at the War Scrolls while we're talking. Like when I look at Croak versus Slan, Croak gets the +2 to casting, Slan gets +1 to casting. Okay, small difference, right? Slan has a 6-up ward, Croak has the 4-up ward. Okay, that's clearly better. To your point, you've got this death for innumerable ages that'll just auto slay. So anyone who hasn't done maths yet, or the maths on this, 3d6 average is 10. So if I can put on 10 or 11 points of damage, well, if you just roll that, average dice roll, there's a good chance that he just disappears completely. And in the age right now where long strikes are absolutely terrorizing people right now, any Stormcast, you can almost guarantee Croak's going to disappear in one shooting phase. But you're right, like even the Celestial Reinforcements, it's not once per battle, it's like once per hero phase. So the recycling of those tanky Croxigors, those tanky Saurus Warriors, you can be more aggressive on those Agrodons. As long as there's 3 or more models in the unit, you're laughing. You are absolutely laughing. So, and then the points is under 300. So either the Slan's going to go up, Croak's going to go down, or Croak needs some help.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like they want Croak to be like mixing it up in melee, but it's just too risky. And let's pretend it used to be that you had to stay away from Croak to keep from like your unit just getting destroyed in Magic. But now you'll take like maybe 2 to 4 mortal wounds if you're next to Croak in the hero phase. Like he's not going to do any damage to you. So it's just not dangerous enough of a threat to put Croak on the board right now, I think. So
like he's decent. Like yeah. He's decent. Don't get me wrong. Like if you take it, it's not a bad choice, but you just get far more value out of the Slan Star Master right now. I could not disagree with you. In fact, I'd probably rather chuck down 2 Slan Star Masters than a Croak. I'd pay a little bit extra and have double than what we used to see back in the day, which was Croak and Slan or whatever.
Yeah. And Croak needed a lot of utility pieces to make him good in the last edition. And when you added all those together, he was very good. Now all that utility stuff is gone, and now it's just base War Scroll, just too short range, not quite enough damage, too expensive. So I think a Slan is the choice.
Yeah, I could not disagree with you on that one. What about some of the other favorite units, ones that really stand out for you? I know, like, you've got that video that, you talk about Ripidactyls. I don't want to, like, completely, get those clicks away from you. I'm sure they've already watched it. But, like, what's some of the hidden gems that maybe we haven't talked about just yet, or things that you love and why you love them?
Sure. You'll see the Hunters of Huanche pop up in just about every single list. The ones with the bolas, not because they're a particularly good damaging or anything out of the ordinary, other than their ability to reduce the opponent's charge by 1 dice. So these guys are incredibly cheap. They're only 90 points. So for something that you can deploy off the board, can come in, they're going to be scoring you battle tactics. The ones that require movement around the board, maybe, or ambushing back behind the opponent. You can score battle tactics with them. You can force the opponent to have to cover their back objectives because these guys are waiting off the board. But also just an incredible shooting ability, which is you roll a dice on a 3-up, you reduce the enemy's charge by 1, and that does last until the start of your next hero phase. So a very good threat against a double turn army. So if you put 2 of these in your list, which is very common, you hit 2 different units. Hopefully you get one of them off. If you get lucky and get both of these abilities off, their 2 hammers are now charging on 1 dice. And that can be brutal for some armies, especially that need to get into melee and do damage to you. So just incredible abilities. They are very squishy. For some reason, they have a 5-up ward. I don't know why, but they're very squishy. They will die instantly, but a very good unit. So these, you have to at least put one of these in almost every list. They're that useful. So
top tier for you. What the difference between the dart pipes and the bolus is the fact that we've got the reducing of the charge where the other dart pipes don't have that ability. So, which is what's elevating the bolus.
The dart pipes are 10 points cheaper. You'll see these sometimes pop up in a list that just didn't quite have enough points, because even on their own, they're only 80 points. This is still a good unit because it can still ambush. It can still do all the things to score objectives, and you don't have to get them really close to an enemy like you would the bolas. So you can take these to just ambush in the corners of the board to score battle tactics and things like that. So still a good unit on its own. For an extra 10 points, if you have it, take the bolas though. So Hunters of Huanche, an excellent unit. You had mentioned go ahead.
No, I agree with you. If the points difference is 10, I'm going bolus every time. They are a good little unit, and having two of these types of units, I've been using like Griffhounds in my my Stormcast list. I've been using, what are they called? The Canary and Daughters of Cain. These little units, they are so valuable for seizing the center, being a screen, taking the flanks, generally harassing, tying things up, charging. There's so many uses for them. If not them, Ripidactyls, like I would say.
Absolutely.
Terror Wings, sorry.
Terror Wings. These ones here, they also benefit from Shadow Strike. So don't forget that when you ambush these guys in, if somebody redeploys, you can use Shadow Strike to get closer to them. If they don't redeploy, you use your ability, and you can use Shadow Strike to move away D6 inches or reposition D6 inches. Or if you've reduced their charge, you could get closer to them if you just want to keep them pinned in. So there's a lot of tactical use to Shadow Strike and Hunters of Huanche with the extra movement. So that's pretty cool.
And plus, if you take some small throwaway versions of this, just to, not reinforced, and you've got a Slaan on the board, you could, get them into danger in turn one, as you've said, reduce the charge by 1 dice roll. If they end up dying anyway, go for that recycle from the Slaan Master and giddy up. Like, they're back in the game.
Yeah. This ends up being a unit that gets recycled in my first movement phase a lot if I make the 4-up roll, because they do tend to get killed pretty quickly. So
they're a no-brainer. I would definitely take 2.
Yeah.
What else? You were going to transition me somewhere else. Where am I going next?
I think you had mentioned the Ripidactyls or Terror Wings are okay if you just need the points.
I just love the models. They're so dumb.
Yeah. Ripidactyls are cheap enough that they fulfill a role that I think is needed in Everlist, which is just kind of your fast movement, your screen, your battle tactic score. So they are fast at a base unit of 14 inches. They are cavalry, so they end up getting some of the buffs that cavalry get, which is like extra movement and stuff. Their damage is fine for 110 points. They do decent damage if you can line up what you need to. They get that standard +1 damage on the charge, which is nice. But really, just they're fast and they fly. That's what they do. And you can lean into that with these. They're cheap enough that you can start them on the flanks. You can start them as a screen, and you can still get them where you need to go. So cheap, fast, and fly, a good combination there.
Hey, quick question. How do I take 2 Ripidactyl riders? Like, I'm seeing it in the app. You can include one if you're the chief.
Yeah.
Because only 2 is only 70 points. So, like, that's not bad.
Yeah. The chief is kind of a weird. I don't know that he's really worth taking as far as like the buffs he gives, but hero slots are quite valuable in this edition because of like list building restrictions and things. So you tend to really value those hero slots.
And what are you getting? You're getting +1 attack characteristic for. It's only a once per battle ability.
Yeah.
Like, would I take an extra hero for this reason? Probably not.
Yeah, I haven't found a reason to take him yet. So
unless I was going all in, like, right, Ripidactyl Chief, I'm going to go like 3 slots of Ripidactyls. Like, I'm just going to go hard onto these things. But no one's doing that. No one.
Yeah. We've mentioned a lot of the Agrodons, which is like our heavy cavalry. They are a pretty good standard. I think you end up with either one unit of these or one unit of Kroxigor. They kind of fill the same role. They just do it a little bit differently. But the Agrodons are decently fast, decently damaging. They have a decent enough ability that allows them to add more attacks as long as they stay in combat, to where they're a good unit. They're not, something that's just extraordinary, but they are a decent unit. They're not quite as tough as you would think. They only have a 4-up save, 5 health, which isn't fantastic. They don't have a ward or anything, so they will die, which is fine. That's how this game works. But they're not like a heavy anvil. They're the thing that you kind of have a plan for. I'm going to hit their priority unit with this unit of Agrodon. So they're very good. A fantastic model. This is the refresh of the old Source Knights essentially, and they did a great job with these. They look wonderful. So
in what situation would I take? So I assume we're going to go to Kroxigors in a minute, or some version of Kroxigors. Why would I take Agrodon Lancers over, say, Kroxigors, considering they offer a similar thing? Like, they do a bit of good damage. They've obviously got a lot of health. What helps your decision tree?
They're faster. That's essentially it. So they fill kind of that middle board role. So, or if you kit it out right, they can be your Alpha Strike. They can be your fast ones, but they're a little bit different wave of what you would think of Kroxigor. So Kroxigor are going to be a little bit slower. They're going to be there to fight, in turn 2 or 3. Agrodons can get there turn 1, turn 2 as needed. So they're a little bit faster and still will stand up to a little bit more than what some of the other cavalry would do. Kroxigor are they take less to get the same damage out of them. So basically, all Kroxigor need, other than, okay, I say that and then I'm going to qualify it with all these things you have to do, but all of that's pretty easy. And generally, the only buff that you really have to work for is just 1 command point for all-out attack, and they do very consistent damage. Agrodons, you got to be charging. You still want all-out attack. You still want some of these. You really want the hero with them if you can afford it. So Agrodons can probably end up doing more damage for their cost, but Kroxigor, I feel like, are a little bit easier to get that and a little bit less resource intensive. So,
yeah, I was going to say Agrodons with the Primal Rage just has more bookkeeping, while Kroxigor, as long as you've got your skink infantry or skink cavalry, you're just getting your buff. Like, it's less reliant on the charge, less reliant on being in combat and that whole primal thing. If you want to lean in, amazing. For simplicity and probably flexibility, I probably personally would go with the Kroxigor Warspawn and just go with some of the movement shenanigans like the astralisms to get me the speed that I'm losing from not having the Agrodons.
Sure. And the good thing is, you know what? And sometimes you don't have to choose. You can take a unit of Agrodons and a unit of Kroxigor also, and they're not going to be butting up against each other as far as like rolls go, because you can hit with Agrodons and then you've still got your Kroxigor to come in and wipe up whatever's left out. So Kroxigor,
neither are a bad choice.
No.
Neither are a bad choice. I think that's the key, right? Is that there's a personal preference here that both are good.
Absolutely. Kroxigor are kind of an interesting unit. There's 2 different variations of it. One's extremely good versus infantry and large units. That's this one, the just base standard Kroxigor. If you get them into the right target, the damage is fantastic. You get +1 damage versus units that have 10 or more models, and then they get the extra anti-infantry. So if you're looking at a unit that is not going to be supported by anything else, it's just going to be by itself, Kroxigor, the normal Kroxigor, is a great choice. Even in a unit of 3, they will go and destroy some smaller units. Or if they have, a small screen that's 10 man, unit that's going to be trying to work the flanks or something, these Kroxigor will go wallop them and lift them off the board. So they can kind of operate on their own. They don't need anything else. As long as you get them in the right target, they will do some tremendous damage. The War Spawn are easier to get their bonuses because I can pretty much guarantee it whenever I want to. So there's some fun tricks with these guys. So what they do, the War Spawn, they get the extra damage, so +1 to the damage characteristics of their attacks, as long as there's a skink infantry or cavalry unit wholly within 12 and in combat. So there's a lot of skink infantry and cavalry in our army, and some stuff that's really good. And so a lot of times you'll have these units in combat somewhere near them or right there beside them. So things like Raptidons pair up extremely well with Warspawn. And so you'll have a lot of times you'll have a big block of Warspawn and a reinforced unit of Raptidons, and they'll kind of go around the board together. And that's a combination you do not want to get tangled up with, because they will do a lot of damage. The heavy scaled skin makes them a little bit tougher to kill in shooting. So that helps. But if monsters ever become the meta choice in Age of Sigmar, these Warspawn are going to just get that dial turned up even more, because they do have that anti-monster +1 rend, which hasn't really come into effect for me all that often. But I can guarantee that +1 damage on them. There's some good tricks here. You can also do Shadow Strike with the Hunters of Huache. So let's say I don't have any Raptidons or I don't have Skink Infantry, but I have some Hunters of Huache off the board. These Warspawn are about to get into combat. I drop down Hunters of Huache 9 inches away. I move them D6, and then they charge along with the Kroxigor. It's basically +1 damage on delivery from these Hunters of Huache, and there's not a lot the opponent's going to be able to do about that, because you're gonna get a decent charge statistically off of that kind of combo there. So a great unit. 6 health on this, on a 4-up save is surprisingly hard to kill. It's a lot of wounds in this unit of, that's reinforced, and there's plenty of ways to make them a little bit harder to kill. All out defense, maybe Quetzal to -1 to their rend, and they'll stick around longer than the opponent usually thinks. And even if you only have like 2 or 3 left, they'll still do decent damage. So I'm a big fan of Kroxigor.
All right, I'm going to throw one more into the ring, and then we'll go to your list. And
Sure.
I would be remiss if we didn't bring up the humble Saurus warrior when I find him eventually, or her. Where is it? There's our Terror Wings. We should like alphabetical order or something. Poor old. Why is the spawn of Chotek doesn't even have the actual spawn?
Has the handler as the picture? Yeah.
This idiot doesn't inspire me to go buy a spawn of Chotek. Maybe that's what the problem with marketing is. Like, this one guy, like, I don't want this beast. There we go. Saurus warrior. Yeah. Here we go. New sculpt as well. I thought, oh my gosh. Why was there not a sprue to upgrade the Saurus guard in the Saurus warrior box? I feel like this was a missed opportunity. I hate that I look at this and I look at this, I look at this, I look at this, I go, you're so derpy.
Yeah. I hope Saurus Guard are up next in the lineup to get refreshed, because the new Saurus Warrior sculpt is great.
So beautiful.
Yeah. So the Saurus Warriors are a very interesting unit. I think this is the unit that we can probably put the most tech into that's worthwhile. So it's a weird war scroll. Okay, so look at its ability, the passive ability, ordered cohorts there. Add 1 to save rolls for this unit while each model in this unit is contesting an objective you control. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through to get this. Each model has to be contesting an objective you control. So you've got to get every single one of these models onto that objective. You have to contest it, and you need to control it to get this buff. That's it's sometimes a lot more difficult than you think, because the Saurus Warrior unit wants to be reinforced. So they have 2 health each. So when you have a unit of 20, you're talking 40 health. And if you can get this +1 to save, it's on they have a 3-up save essentially now. This is difficult to do though, because objectives are smaller. And the way you want to play the Source Warriors is in Quetzal. You really want to take advantage of their toughness here. And once you start layering on these buffs that you can do for the Source Warriors, they become extremely tough. So you get +1 to save, assuming you line this up. With Quetzal, you're -1 rend to this unit as long as you're in your territory. Okay. You can use all-out defense for another +1 to save. Now, obviously, these will only stack as far as they have rend. So generally, the best you're ever going to do is a 3-up save on your roll. But you can give them a 5-up ward from the Starseer. That's on a dice roll. It's only once per game, etc., etc. You can give them a 6-up award from the Astrolith. So there's lots of ways to make these Source Warriors very tough. There's also a spell we talked about earlier that's -1 rend to an enemy unit. So, I've lined it up before to where somebody's coming in and you're like, okay, if you had it, I'm going to ignore 5 rend, or something. So these things become extremely tough. 40 wounds, 40 health on this unit. So they can be extremely tough. What I found is they're 170 for 10 of them. A reinforced unit in an army is a great anvil. Park that on, if you have one objective in your home territory, park that there. The opponent is pretty much never going to grab that away from you. It's very difficult to remove these Source Warriors. They don't do a ton of damage, but it's decent enough damage that you're going to win that prolonged fight against this unit. So I've found that they survive quite a bit longer than a lot of people think, because you can kind of layer those buffs on them. This is actually the unit I'm having a lot of fun with right now. I've been playing Warriors over the last month or two, and they've turned out to be a lot of fun. This is a warrior heavy list. Is probably the only time you'd take that, or not the only time, but probably the best time you would take the battle formation for the teleport, because you could teleport this warriors onto an objective and make sure that you're wholly on it, contesting it. That could be the edge case for that battle formation.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned like Quetzal, for example. Like, just talking this all through, I wonder if the +2 movement is the better option. I'm not saying the better option, but like when I think about this, like, right, do I need the extra movement in order to get wholly onto an objective? I think about some of the objectives that might be sitting, partially in territory, not wholly in territory. So it means I've only got, I've got to put all of my bodies on half an objective, basically. So would I be better off not having a reinforced unit? A lot of questions come up that I don't have the answer for, but it's a interesting, when you look at the War Scroll, it's very vanilla. It's basic, but it's all the stuff that you can do, the intricacies within the faction, that really brings this War Scroll to life, which I love. This is a list builder's dream.
Yeah. I think you hit on something with the unreinforced unit. It's still a unit of 10 is still 20 wounds, and that you can get to be fairly tough. This, if you go heavy Source Warriors, or if you're playing, 1 or 2 units of Source Warriors in your list, you do end up in some interesting circumstances where I've had games on battle plans where our territories are in kind of weird shapes, or stair stepped across the battlefield, where I'm putting my units in very odd positions to make sure they're wholly in my territory, each one's on the objective, that kind of thing. So it does provide a weird gameplay of these Source Warriors. So in that case, a smaller unit of 10 are much easier to get on an objective. It's still a decent amount of wounds. It's only 170 points. It will surprise the opponent with like not being able to kill them, especially if you just give them a few buffs here that they're getting. All out defense, you get this +1 to save. Maybe you've taken Quetzal. All of a sudden, 20 wounds on with essentially +3 to save is very difficult to kill. So they finally have a use, which it's been a little while since we've said the Source Warriors were playable. So it is kind of nice to be able to see them. And I've seen 4-in-1 lists that have a unit of Reinforced Warriors in it as their anvil. So it's a playable unit.
I think it's a good time to be alive when it comes to Seraphon, because most units, even the Engine of the Gods, even the Bastiladon, even like when I was looking at some of my research notes, like a lot of the War Scrolls are seeing play, and you can build around it depending on what your flavor is going to be, which is good, which is what I've always wanted. I always hate when it's like one-dimensional, this is the list. Like, I've been playing Stormcast for the last few months, well, since 4th edition. I'm so sick of prosecutors. I'm so sick of long strikes. I'm like, this is like I don't want to be forced to play into this. It bores the shit out of me. Like, give me something with, and it's probably why I love Gits so much, because Gits has, the squeak build, you've got your trogs, you've got all these varieties, and you can mix and match them, which is where Seraphon also plays very similar type of thing. You can do whatever you want and still do relatively well.
Absolutely.
So we got 2 lists. Caleb has given me first off Slaan and Friends. So this is a Shadow Strike Star Host. You've gone Celestial Manipulation, Morbid Conjuration, and it has the Manifestation Law. You've got 2 regiments, so it's a 2-drop. Regiment 1 would be your Slaan Star Master, which has got Coathouse Familiar and the Beastmaster. You've got reinforced Agrodon Lancers, reinforced Croxigor Warspawned, reinforced Raptidon Chargers. Then you've got Regiment 2, which is your Skink Star Priest with a unit of Hunters of Hawachi with the Dart Pipes. You've got Hunters of Hawachi with the Starstone Bolus, and then a reinforced unit of Raptidon Chargers. So I know we've talked a lot about these units here, so like let's bring it to life. Like, what does it do? How does it work?
This is, just kind of looking at some of the best units we have and how they work together. So you do kind of have a order of operations you can take here in this list. It's extremely fast with the Raptidons. That can be your first wave. There's 2 reinforced unit of those. They're your standard light cavalry. That's very good in the meta right now. They're very fragile, but that's fine. They're also extremely cheap, so you're okay if they do get killed. But you have your Alpha Strike if you want it, either by the Raptidons or the Agrodons. You have your your Anvil plus Hammer of the Warspawn. You have good casting, so it all kind of fills all those roles that you need to have in a list to play well. You see some things that you kind of have to sacrifice to get all this in. The Star Priest, the Skink Star Priest, isn't really that good, but it's a cheap hero that gives you access to the stuff that you need in a regiment. So you kind of got to take it. I've actually played that Skink Star Priest as something out on the edges to just go grab battle tactics if needed, because he's that useless. His ability's fine. It's a crit auto wound ability, which is fine. It's a good ability, but just not critical to the list. You've got your ambushing things in this list, and one of the things that works really well with Morbid Conjuration is Hunter's Fwache pair well with like shackles to reduce movement to keep people from charging you. Purple Sun and Raptidons are actually a great combination, so that you're essentially giving them extra rend. They only have -1 rend, and they have a ton of attacks. Raptidons do. You're rolling 60 dice at somebody, and half of those are doing 2 damage attacks. So it's a lot of dice you're going to be rolling at somebody with this unit, and they're fast, especially in this list. They're going to be screaming across the board. So a pretty good all-around unit. You have that extra unit of Raptidons, about 280 points. You have about that much flex in, I think, just to kind of give it your own flavor. You'll see a lot of this stuff pop up in the competitive lists here, I think. So this one's kind of more if you're trying to go for as good a score as possible. I think this is kind of what you're looking towards.
Yeah, dig it. I like it a lot. Yeah, no, and obviously we talked about Croxigor versus Agrodons. Here's a great example where they work both, and both have a role to play. And I can also see where you made the comment that if you got the extra 10 points, you upgrade those dart pipes to bolus. Unfortunately, this is 2K on the nose for you. Otherwise, I have no doubt that dart pipe is a second unit of Hunters of Hawachi with bolus.
Yeah, and if you end up with the extra points, upgrading the Star Priest to the Star Seer is always the best choice. I end up sacrificing a lot of times the Star Seer down to the Star Priest just to make list building work, but the Star Seer is quite a bit better than the Star Priest. So if you have enough points, upgrade him. So
if you were going to do that, where would the points come from in this list?
I think you could probably not bring 2 units of Raptidons. You could bring something a little bit less expensive, like Ripperdactyls. Perform a similar role in that they're fast, fragile, can do decent damage, skink unit, and so they're cheaper. So you could use them instead.
Yeah, fair call. The second list is a Saurus meat wall. So it is Shadow Strike Star Host. You've got your Slaan Star Master. Some similarities here. Actually, no, that's a lie. You've got Coattails Familiar, which is common between the two, but you've gone to Being of the Stars for the ethereal as the trait. You've got yourself Raptidon Chargers reinforced, Ripperdactyl Riders, 2 units of Saurus Warriors reinforced. You've got a second regiment of the Skink Star Priest with 2 units of those Hunters of Hawachi with the bolus, also Pterodon Riders. And then some interesting things, because one would assume if you're bringing in a regiment of renown, it would be Callus, Toll, and Friends. But you have gone a little different here. Is Elthwin's Thorns, which is the Sylvaneth Regiment of Renown. Fascinating. And I can't wait to unpack this one. And I'm pretty sure you also might have a video that touches on this potentially. If I remember correctly, it might be under the spicy combos for Seraphon video.
This is a regiment of renown that I have really been enjoying lately. And in fact, I think you'll see in a lot of the higher performing Seraphon lists, they include a regiment of renowned, unfortunately. Because sometimes
I think a lot of order, like Callus and Toll, is on every list that but this one's a different one because I don't see this one nearly as much.
So this, we'll go straight into what the Regiment of Renown does, because it's very interesting. So what it does on its own is very good, but it pairs extremely well with the Hunters of Huanche with Starstone Bolas. So Elthwin's Thorns is some Gossamed Archers and an Arch Revenant. Odd combination because Arch Revenant doesn't really do anything to Gossamed Archers, but whatever. What they do is they move 12, they shoot 12 inches. Have good cohesion, 2-inch cohesion. So they make an excellent screen as well. And they fly. So they're fast, they fly, make a good screen. What they do when they shoot, though, is they will reduce the opponent's charge by however much damage they do up to 6, which is fantastic on its own. But you pair that with the Hunters of Huanche, which are also reducing the charge by 1 dice roll. And I have gotten opponents' hammers down to 0 charge many times. And it is amazing when that happens. There's, some dice roll involved. Obviously, this is a game, but when that happens, you just absolutely neuter their hammer, and it lasts until your next turn. So this is a list that I'm perfectly fine going first. Oh, also, hold on. This isn't all it does. It also teleports in the shooting phase and moves D6 in the shooting phase. So all of a sudden, this list, which has, I called it the Source Meat Wall, has massive anvils, but also some crazy movement shenanigans. So I'm moving stuff all over the board in the shooting phase. Like after all the movement's done, I'm moving stuff, teleporting stuff. It's a lot of fun. So
I I'm having nightmares and flashbacks of the Khorne Demon Prince who used to have movement or charges. Was it movement and charges? 18 as an 18-inch bubble, which is basically half the board back then. I'm having nightmares of like how many failed charges and how many failed moves I had. But that is a wonderful little list techie. Like if you don't like that chess kind of like 40 chess kind of thing, you probably don't enjoy this as much, and Callus and Toll probably come into play a little better. But that is a wonderful debuff. It'll throw your opponent off. It will deny battle tactics of your opponent. That's a general pain in the backside.
And so what this list is trying to do is I'm going to go sit on circles and I'm going to try not to let you charge me. And so it's got 2 big units of reinforced warriors, but we're in Shadow Strike. So that feels weird, but it works pretty well because those warriors are trying to get on the objectives and then you're moving everything else all over the place. Scoring battle tactics. This list is excellent at scoring battle tactics because it's got a unit of Ripperdactyl Riders and a unit of Pterodon Riders. Pterodon's just because I needed the points. But those are your fast units that are going to be just gumming up the works and scoring battle tactics. Raptidon Chargers, the reason I didn't take Beastmaster is because my Raptidon Chargers in this type of list is not trying to get there like turn 1. This is I'm going to answer whatever you do send at me. So generally, I'm going to try to get you gummed up with some Source Warriors and then charge my Raptidons around. And at that point, I don't really need Beastmaster as much. It's still useful, but Raptidon Chargers are going to be fast enough in turn 2 and 3, plus Shadow Strike if I need them to get there extra. And they'll be plenty fast there. So the manifestation lore I did take here, I think is kind of interesting. I did put Twilight Sorceries in here because I'm not necessarily going for like the damage output of Morbid with like Purple Sun and stuff, even though Shackles would go well into this list too, so it would be fine. But Twilight Sorceries allows me to get the portal out, which this list is probably taking Quetzal because I don't care too much about the movement, so I'm reducing your Rend by 1. With portals, I'm going to hit whatever hammer I'm not reducing the charge by. I'm going to hit that hammer with another -1 to Rend. So now, let's say your hammer has 2 Rend. I'm negating all that. And if you make the charge. And then my Source Warriors are getting their buffs from sitting on objectives and all-out defense. So that works well with that. It's got the wall. I can't remember what the name of it is, but the wall that will prevent shooting that can just kind of be thrown out there. Prismatic Palisade. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. That can go up and block things. Manifestations are so at blocking things, but it can get in the way and it prevents shooting. So it's really just kind of like a debuff list. My only real hammer is the Raptidons, but I find that that's generally enough to hit whatever I need to and kill. And so it's a pretty fun list that has some interesting tech that you don't normally see in just a straight melee fight, which is what you would expect with Saurus. So an interesting list that I've been having a lot of fun with.
And we talked a little bit as well, like you could trade this out to be Primal, where you've got the Life Swarm for the Saurus Warriors. You've got, Purple Sun and Gnashing Jaws, no, Purple Sun, Burning Head and Gnashing Jaws to be more of the damage kind of dealer. You could go Cronspine. I think this is a very different build. Like this reminds me a lot of like the techie Seraphon from like late second, maybe early third, where there was a lot more shenanigans on the board. You had your little chameleon skinks coming in and out, and like there was a lot of little shenanigans that used to be able to do. So I love the difference. And you know what? Like, okay, hypothetical here. I don't own the Elthwyn's Thorns. Yes, I know the list will change if you didn't have that. But is there a suitable replacement, or what would you do with the points if you didn't have that Regiment of Renown without changing the list otherwise?
You could probably upgrade your Skink Star Priest, or you could take just something else to do some damage. So they're 260. So maybe swap out some Pterodon Riders and Elfman's Thorns, and you're getting another unit of Raptidons. You might want something else to be a little hammer if you're not having these debuffs, because they will get to you. So that would be beneficial there. Something else to do some damage.
I just want to check the points before I say something stupid. I've probably said many stupid things. My money, go Bastiladon.
Yeah, the snakes one would work if you. I think you could squeeze that one in probably, but
that's what I was thinking. Like, just get a Bastiladon in, just go up. Oh, there's another thing we used to hate. You stupid one-up bloody. Like, why you got so many annoying things? Like your one-up Bastiladons and the crazy amount of mortal wounds those skinks used to be able to do with the Star Priest.
Yeah.
Like, far out. You have had a lot of annoying little rules over the years. I'm having flashbacks.
Yeah, I think Hunters of Huanche is probably the thing that would annoy the opponent the most out of Seraphon, is because you're just reducing those charges. It's, you're paying a lot of points for this hammer unit, and now you don't get to use it, especially if you're you get that the minuses to charge. Let's say they do get close enough to you, maybe they can make a charge. You redeploy, and now there's so many abilities with that type of list that's going to make it hard for the opponent to get to you.
Yeah,
and you're fine if they end up charging your warriors, because you can usually deal with that. So,
yeah, love it. All right, I got some burning questions, and we'll wrap things up if that's cool with you.
Yeah.
All right, couple of. By the way, I love talking to you, mate.
Thanks.
I'm actually I'm so upset I didn't get you in 3rd edition. I swear I did message you like, he hates me. He's too big and famous. He's too big and famous now. He's got 2 versions of the temple. All right, burning questions. Marv, asking which manifestation law is the alternative morbid. We've talked a little bit about that. Primal, Twillet, something else.
Yeah, you can. I think you can play with any of them. I think the Slaan is. I think I may have mentioned that before, but in my mind, the Slaan is only as good as your morbid or your morbid conjuration, your manifestations. So if some of those get nerfed pretty hard, maybe you don't even play with a Slaan. I've played plenty of times without a Slaan, and it still works fine. You take one wizard to get off, maybe a Kronspine or whatever spell you're kind of really wanting, and it still works fine. So it's not an auto take, although it's fairly close to it.
It's cheap enough that you want to have it in the list. Mm-hmm. If it ever went up to like, I don't know, 350 kind of thing, I think that becomes a real decision. Sure. But 270, double caster, all the things that it brings, the regeneration of unit.
Yeah.
That pays for itself. Like that literally pays for itself and the play style. And you know what? Who cares, Marv? Because you're going to get your own endless spells. We've manifested that from the celestial realms. You're getting I don't know when, but it'll come. Is there any common in-game mistakes that maybe new Seraphon players should avoid, or maybe they don't know it's a mistake? Like any advice, I guess, in avoiding those mistakes?
Ooh, probably. I think being too aggressive with the Agrodons can be a mistake. So previously, I would charge them into screens just to kill them to get my rage going, but they're just not quite tough enough without the old scaly skin. And so if you are alpha striking Agrodons, they're gonna die. The 4-up save is not enough to keep them alive anymore. And so pick your targets with those. It's still a great unit, don't get me wrong, and they'll still kill a lot of things, but they won't survive that hit back from something significant. So be careful being too aggressive with them. It could probably be said about every army, to be honest, but other mistakes. Trying to think of all the mistakes I've made playing Seraphon over this edition. Playing for your battle tactics, I think I mentioned that before, because if you're generally not going to have a 1-drop Seraphon list like some armies can, just because you're a little too restrictive on. You still got to be able to score battle tactics. I tried a 1-drop before the points went up on this last battle scroll, and it was fun, but I literally couldn't score battle tactics, so it was tough.
I think for me, if I buy you some time for a second, I think it's the tempo. Seraphon is one that you learn the tempo of when do you start aggressively, when do you slow burn, when do you set up that charge, or like the Hunters of Hawachi with the bolus, right? Just because you can reduce a charge by 1 dice doesn't mean you should. Like, do you do it turn 1 and go super aggro, or do you hold back and wait for that perfect time? And that is a thing that you learn when you play Zinch, when you play Seraphon, when you play Lumineth, even Gits. It's the tempo and like how to respond with your tools. You're not necessarily that aggro, I'm going to go 1 drop and go hard at you quickly. You are often better responding to your opponent and how the game unfolds. So for me, it's always a bit about tempo and just understanding when to pull what lever at what time. But that's my limited experience with Seraphon, playing as Seraphon.
Yeah, I think you hit on something there with the hunters. You don't have to drop them turn 1 if you don't want to, if there's not a good target for them. Especially because redeploy does exist. So if you're just dropping 1, any redeploy will get them out of range if you don't have Shadow Strike. So, and then they will die. So, you can save them for later, reducing what they've got left on the board down to 1d6 charge is pretty valuable, and they can still put pressure on the backfield. So you don't have to put everything on the board turn 1. Definitely.
All right, last question. I've got a few other questions, but I feel like we've talked about them. Like Sprinter had asked around like why Raptidon charges were so popular. I think we've unpacked that a lot. But you're in charge of the new battle tome. You're getting new units. What are you adding to the what's the thing that's missing on your roster? That's not a Dread Saurian because that's already been in there. It'll come back. It's your Mega Gargant equivalent. Like, what's the thing that you'd love to see on the new battle tome?
I would love to see either a hero monster, like hero riding a monster that's like a named version that's scary, it could be expensive. That's fine. I just want it to be terrifying. I mean, one of the things that draws us into Seraphon are these big monsters. So we want to play the Carnosaur. It should be feared on the table. And it's been a long time since that's happened. So I would love to see a hero monster that is just absolutely terrifying. That would be a lot of fun. As far as like the battle tome goes, whenever that happens, who knows what the tempo is going to be here. Me personally, I've always been a thunder lizard kind of guy. And so I would, yes, I would love to see monsters get some buffs there. Right now, they just don't do enough damage. They don't really have a role. There's a lot of ways you could do that, whether messing with their control score, getting it back to what it used to be, where Stegodons had like 10 control, was always really fun to play into a list. But they've really got to, I think they've really got to layer some of these synergies back into this army, because there's a lot of heroes that there's literally no reason to take them. And you kind of want a reason to put them into a battle regiment. So why would I want to take this hero? He does nothing. So give me some synergies there between the different units. That's what I'd like to see. So fix the monsters, fix some heroes. Yeah,
love that. I love that, because what got me into Seraphon originally is, I don't know if you remember they had that little, it was before Broken Realms. I can't think of what the box was called, but the box came with 2 Steggies and a Bastiladon. It was literally the box.
Yeah.
And I bought 2 or 3 of them because I'm like, right, I'm going to run 6 Stegodons with a bloody Engine of the Gods. I'm going to have like 1 or 2 Bastiladons, and that's it. That's going to be my casual Friday night chill out with friends. And it just did, like, you're right. Like, they have not tapped into the monster style of Seraphon very well in a long time.
Yeah.
The other thing I probably miss a lot is in the old Lizard Man book, well before Seraphon, there was a lot of unique heroes. And I loved those old, idiot, unique Saurus warrior. And funnily enough, is it the new Underworlds? You can see that they've got the inspiration from the old Saurus warrior hero. I've forgotten his name right now, but you had a chameleon skink hero. You had all of these really unique heroes, and for an army that has such lineage from, like, you know, the world that was, and, you know, the celestial being, and I loved, again, I talked to you about Muzamundi. I love the old named Slaans. Like, give me more than Croak. Give me other named heroes that I can follow a story with. I don't know, like, for me, I always was a fan of, like, the Seraphon from the jungles rather than the space and time guys.
Yeah. Oh, if they were to give us a Slaan on a Stegodon, that would be, yeah.
It was going to be my Engine of the Gods. I was going to be, I was making an Engine of the Gods using the, I don't know if you ever saw it. There was a Slaan from Games Day that's like a resting bitch face, where he's just like literally like, I've still got it. And I was going to put him on top of my Engine of the Gods. I was going to be like Lord Muzamundi reincarnate.
Yeah. That would be awesome. That would be a lot of fun.
I think, to your point, bring up the fun, bring up the monsters. You've done the refresh of the Croxigors and all the other cool things. It's monster time.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't need to be like super competitive. I just want a 3-2 list with Stegageddon again. So that was a lot of fun. I want new Stegodons,
bigger size. Like, I look at all these things in the mortal realms, and a Stegodon's like this weird. What's wrong with you? You're so small.
Yeah, especially compared to how, you know, there's some size creep in some of these stuff, and the Croxigor are gigantic, and you put them next to the Stegodon, and the Stegodon starting to look pretty small. Yeah.
All right, people, I hope you obviously enjoyed this chat. Caleb, you know, I always love talking to you, and you are a wealth of knowledge, especially when it comes to Seraphon. Go check out the channel. Link is down below. Caleb Hastings is literally the channel. So it's like Vince Venturella. Like, it's just, that's the name. So, like, just search it. You'll find it. Subscribe. You're always dropping a whole bunch of great, you know, the meta and like unfolding things. And I always love your videos. But is there any shout outs or anything you want to mention before we wrap this up?
If you're not subscribed to AoS Coach, hit that button and subscribe to Coach. Appreciate it, Coach. It's always fun to talk to you. And sorry I missed your email about the last one. I definitely would have joined if I had seen it. So
that's all right. The great, it was not a part of the great plan. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. No love. Any shout outs?
No, I do this YouTube stuff just for fun, and because I just love talking about Seraphon and Warhammer. So
all right. Well, I'll shout out the Texas seed on your behalf. I'm sure you.
There you go.
The shout out to Texas. Hopefully, I see many of you at the World Championship coming up in a few weeks. I still need to come back. I miss Texas. I need some good barbecue.
Absolutely.
All right, Caleb, we're going to wrap this up. I hope you enjoyed the chat. You know, folks, Discord got a really cool Seraphon chat. Come chat with us. We all love talking lists. We all talk. And I want to hear from you, like, what's your manifestation lore going to look like? But thank you all. Caleb, I'll chat to you later. And follow the great plan. Bye.
See you.
Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AoS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1-1 on a spellcast.